It's time to hit some NaNoWriMo, getting an early start today compared to where I have been. As I'm thinking about this story, there's some changes that are going to need to be made during the editing process. Let's go ahead and look at the story now. We're talking about Rise Again, a sci-fi novel by Jay Wilburn. I can already think of a couple plot holes that I'm going to need to address during the editing phase, and some conversations that should be had, things that need to be discussed by the characters before certain people leave the stage and that kind of thing. So also some missed opportunities with the work. I'll need to, because there's different narrators for different chapters, I'm going to need to change up the voice a little bit so that we're not using the same phrasing between characters and stuff. I think I've not done a great job of differentiating that enough. Usually in a novel it's not that big a deal because you don't have that many viewpoint characters, but we keep each chapter often goes with an outsider who's looking in, and they're seeing a lot more than some of the characters on the inside, and so we have to filter the story through their perceptions, backgrounds, things of that nature, and I need to do a little better job of that. So let's look at where we are. We are on chapter 21, only a few paragraphs in, because that got me to 40,000. I need to get to 42,500 today, so let's read where we are. Trey and I watched the man die with his head downhill as he bled out in the snow. We did not hurt him or participate in his beating, but we did not step in to stop it either. Our guide, the man Trey had hired with scrap copper he managed to collect, finally said, "We need to keep moving." The attackers didn't even bother checking the man's pockets. They left him with everything he had on, and he died with all his possessions, whatever they might have been. I don't know why, but that somehow made it worse. No robbery, no desperation behind the crimes, just a group of men who decided the guy couldn't go on living. They killed him because they wanted him dead and nothing more. I don't know why it bothered me that no one wanted to take what he had. Alright. It was incredibly cold. Somehow we had drifted too far west, but it still should have been warm. I suppose whatever happened to this world could change the climate. Trey's world and mine, to a lesser degree, were getting warmer. This could be a world that got colder. Still, I couldn't figure out how we got this far west. We left my home through one of Trey's portals in North Carolina. Then androids took us to a hospital within minutes. The transport moved fast. It must have gone far in that time. Then we found ourselves in the Dakotas, I think. It was hard to tell when history was changed enough. Similar names did not mean similar places. Okay. No, we needed to march back. Not back. We needed to march east, because whatever was wrong in this half of this world's North America, it was interfering with whatever technology was inside Trey. So we were traveling by foot until we figured out what was keeping his tech from recharging this time. What if there is no place where the interference lets up? I asked. Trey stared at the guide's back and cut his eyes at me. Then I suppose we'll need to find ourselves a little farm and settle down like Patrick and Evelyn did. I looked over my shoulder and picked out the spot where the man had just died. It was the only bright color across this frozen landscape. Maybe we should have stayed with them, knowing what we know now. Portals are one way, Trey said. Sight for us is just regret. Okay, did I have him? Portals are one way, Trey said. Hindsight for us is just regret. It could have been wolves, but it just looked like a pack of hungry dogs to me. They gathered around the body to take what no one else seemed to want. I turned my eyes forward and never looked back again. The guide, what would you call it? The guide didn't pull back his hood, but he used his thumbs to he didn't pull back his hood, but he used his thumbs to this isn't the right word, but I'm going to use it anyway. He used his thumbs to part the material on both sides enough to see more peripheral. Once he was satisfied that whatever he was looking for was either there or not there, he turned off the trail of dirty snow and led us into the trees up the slope use the rock. Excuse me. I wondered if it was a signpost that marked where he needed to leave the trail, or if he was making certain that no one was close enough to see us leave the trail. Try to use the rocks to not leave so many tracks for a while. I assume he was not wanting to be followed. Trey did better than me, but we both slipped off the rocks, disturbing the snow more than our guide did. He huffed out clouds of breath, but didn't say anything else to us. The incline grew steeper as the rocks gave out. Okay, the incline grew steeper as the rocks gave out. We all left tracks then. Not footprints, but wide gouges where we forced our way up through the snowdrifts that were shin deep or worse. I missed the rocks. I missed the stepping stones at that point. Alright. Stepping stone's a compound word? I believe it is. Alright. Things leveled out and we turned in a direction I thought was east, but I really had no clue. The sky was a sheet a little dirtier than the snow. Snow gathered in the branches and fell around us as we trudged. Through. enough fell into my collar to make me wish I'd never come, and to fear I might go hypothermic. We came upon a platform that peeked out of the deep snow. The guide unhooked 2 shovels from underneath a partially exposed wooden corner. He folded them out and handed the metal tools off to each of us. He walked a few feet away and swept snow off a stump to sit down. He didn't argue with us. He didn't offer an explanation or an excuse about his age or health. He just planted his gloves upon his knees and cocked his elbows, leaning forward. Trey started sweeping snow off the top of the platform with the blade of his little shovel. We had gotten no instructions on how to proceed, so I simply started what would you call it, sweeping snow away from under the edges of the platform. The guide just stared until we got the idea on our own of what was expected. He might have just stared at us all night if that's what it took. I exposed one metal wheel and got the idea of what we were dealing with. I dug a little harder. The cart had 4 wheels. After I heaved the snow away, I started cutting at the damp black soil, but never found a track. Trey finished with the snow and started chopping at the ice underneath. Air and water bubbled around below the smooth ice. It started dripping off onto me, so I gave up on finding the tracks. Good Lord, did I misspell that? Okay. So I gave up on finding the tracks and joined Trey in de-icing. Is that a compound word? Looks weird. De-icing. Alright. By the time the wet wood was clear of snow and ice, I leaned hard on the platform with my lungs burning cold. My body was numb as it ached along every bone. I tried to straighten my back, but the muscles had locked up tight. I was so tired. My stomach hurt with a cramping nausea. The guide, finally satisfied, stood from his stump and took the shovel from me. He cleared some more snow on my side of the platform. Maybe the front. Trey joined him, but they only cleared a couple feet before. Oh gosh, he only cleared a couple feet before the guide folded the shovels up. He pushed me aside, and I forced my back straight through locked teeth. The guide folded. I'm using folded a lot. Okay. The guide revealed a wedge of metal that he set into place like a cow pusher. On the front of a train. He hopped up onto the platform in one bound. Trey had to heave one knee over and crawl up. After 3 failed attempts, Trey took my arms and I cried out as my back popped a dozen times before I laid on my belly on the platform. Let's say on the deck. The guide looked around us in all directions after my outcry. He said nothing about it, but narrowed his eyes at me. He folded. No, I'm doing that again. He opened a pair of winged doors on the platform, and I'm going to use folded again. Everything's folded. Okay. And hoisted. No, I think I've used that too. Platform and extended a drive shaft before attaching 2 handles. This was a push car. Where, I'm going to do a new paragraph for this sentence. Where were the tracks, though? He motioned for Trey and I to take the front side handle with our backs to the pusher. He took the other side and we started pumping. I felt it when we hit the unshoveled snow, but the guide kept pumping the bar up and down. We continued to counter and complement his motion. We broke through the snow, slowed a bit, broke through again, and so on. I saw the okay, you didn't have to see it, you can just say it. Ruts in the dirt marked our path behind the push car. That's probably a compound word, but I'll deal with it later. Alright, behind the push car, there were no tracks, just the ruts. Okay. Those must have been pre-cut and were now buried under the snow. Tracks would be easier, I said. My voice was small, but Trey gave me the lightest of taps with his elbow beside me. It was a nothing hit, but it hurt my joints. Our guide didn't seem to notice, but my guess is that... Oh, thanks, Millie. I appreciate it. I liked what you were doing earlier. I'm looking forward to seeing the some of your book talks as we go forward. I hadn't heard of the Mexican Gothic, but it looks kind of cool. And the fact that you're doing a lot of horror books, I think, is cool too. So I'll be tuning in through the week. Our guide didn't seem to notice, but my guess is that he didn't care. All right. He reached under the bar while still pumping us along through the trees and snow. Okay. He reached under the bar while still pumping us through the trees and snow. There, he flipped a switch and a motor of sorts kicked in. It sounded more like hissing air than combustion. Sounded more like hissing air than combustion, but the work got easier. He whistled and motioned for me to take his place. Trey and I pumped with the assistance of the little engine, say air engine, little air engine, and our guide sat down cross-legged. Trey and I pumped with the assistance of the little air engine, and our guide sat down cross-legged, facing forward and saying nothing. He didn't tell us we couldn't stop, but we assumed we didn't have an option and kept going. He didn't tell us we couldn't stop, but we assumed we didn't have an option and kept going. Snow. Let's make this a new sentence, new paragraph. Snow blasted out on both sides as we picked up speed. I glanced over my shoulder at the double line of sharp cut ruts in the exposed ground behind us. I didn't understand how this could possibly work, but it did. You holding up? Trey asked. I turned my attention back on him. All right. 41, 141, 84. Okay. I turned my attention back on him. I wasn't sure I had it in me to answer without blacking out, but it turned out I could talk just fine. It's been a tiring day. I assume we'll stop at night, but who knows, right? The guide did not react at all and offered no answer. Trey let out a little chuckle that put puffs of mist into the air. Trey let out a little chuckle that put puffs of mist into the air, like we were a little train. Like we were a real little train. I guess talking costs extra. I laughed then, but it hurt. Do you have any idea what caused this timeline? What did you write in your notebook? Just guesses at the moment. But I'm thinking mid-20th century shift, and possibly an asteroid strike or a series of them. No nuclear weapons I could see. No nuclear weapons I heard of. Not on this continent. Anyway, we may learn more as we get clear of the interference in this area, or we get to a friendlier region. Are you optimistic about either of those two possibilities? Trey might have shrugged, but it was hard to tell with us putting our weight into each downward pump. Snow blasting up and around us in chunky bursts was distracting too. Come on now, might have. How long have I been writing? That's embarrassing. Okay. Snow blasted up and around us in chunky bursts. Snow blasting up and around us in chunky bursts was distracting too. Okay. He said, I'm holding on to a little stubborn hope, and I'm reserving the right to be dismal the entire way. I tried to laugh, but settled for just breathing and heaving bursts and heaving efforts. I'm using bursts a lot too. Okay. I tried to laugh but settled for just breathing and heaving efforts. Closing my eyes for a few seconds, I caught myself lilting forward and snapped awake. Closing my eyes for a few seconds, I caught myself lilting forward and snapped awake just before I would have taken the handle and bar, taken the cold metal of the handle and bar to the chin. If I had knocked myself out, I would have at least gotten a break. What were we talking about? I asked with eyes wide in the cold wind. Trey outdid me by laughing and said nothing, everything, you know, the usual. What war? I asked. He stared at me and then shook his head. What? I said, what war? Which war was it? I thought I misheard you the first time. He shouted back at me. I heard you right, but have no idea what you mean. Earlier, before we left Patrick and Trey back in the last world, you said, no, it wasn't you. Evelyn said there was a specific war you were trying to change the outcome of. Trey smiled, but it was dampened, barely a grimace, really. All right. Trey smiled, but it was dampened, barely a grimace, really. Can't change anything, Rick. You know that. I'm just bumbling along until I find a world. I'm just bumbling along until I find a world. Until I find a world where the outcome was different already. My efforts have been on my downward push. He took the couple seconds of rest to wave a gloved hand at the landscape rushing along beside us. Well, you see how my efforts are going. If you see a cute little farm that catches your interest, say something and we'll pull over. Hey, Miami Vice City 84. Appreciate you coming back. Everything's going pretty well. My goal is 42,500 a day, and I'm slowly closing in on 42,000. So we'll see how that goes. Hoping the story turns out well. It's going to require a lot of editing. There's already plot holes and some things like that I'm thinking of from earlier that I'll go back to address, but right now it's just getting the story down. Alright, I let that be the end of it for maybe a minute. My mind was about as numb and tired as my body, but I couldn't leave it. Maybe even then I knew something wasn't right. What war? Trey took a deep breath and blew it out like a chimney before he answered. The civil one. What? Trey tilted his head at me and widened his eyes like he was talking to an annoying child. I know the Civil War happened in your world while we were waiting for Patrick to heal and come back with guns blazing. I looked it up on your computer. The Civil War, I asked. Yes, that's the one. It could ultimately be any number of others, or a world where that never happened because of a different timeline. But I'd like to see at least one world where it played out differently, just to see. I tried to wrap my brain around his answer. I had only been in only been in 4 different worlds thus far, counting the one I was born in and abandoned on a whim, essentially. Trey was studying President. Come on, Jay, spell some things right, just for fun. Was studying President Buchanan when I walked in on him one time. that was getting into details I didn't understand. Trey was studying nuances of history I took for granted. He loathed tyranny and dictatorships and spoke as if the multiverse were full of them in every imaginable form. I couldn't begin to imagine what subtle differences to that long ago war and all its aftermath might change. Reconstruction obviously wasn't great. Jim Crow that followed either. Violent consequences still lingered even in 2020 in my world. But what subtle change would fix all that? What needs to be different? The whole thing. The whole thing, Trey said. We had compared presidents. As far as I could tell, and as much as Trey could tell, presidential history in our worlds was the same through Bill Clinton's first term. Global warming had moved faster in his world. Global warming had moved faster in his world. iPhones were invented sooner. Hard to believe. Hold on. Maybe it wasn't so hard to believe that social media coming a few years earlier and a few degrees hotter might not destroy the world. But if the changes in Trey's world started during the Civil War, then how could the presidents be the same? That seemed unlikely. What was different when you compared our histories? What was different about the Civil War between our two worlds? What was different when you compare our histories? What was different about the Civil War between our two worlds? We hit a snowbank, and I thought we were going to be buried. We hit a snowbank, and I thought we were going to be buried. If I wasn't holding on to the handle of the pump bar of our cart, I would have been swept off and buried. I didn't have the strength to dig myself out of a few inches of snow, much less a couple feet. It was still a close thing, as it was. It was still a close thing anyway. Alright. I opened my eyes to a white out swirl of snow around us. At that point, either my hands were frozen to the bar, or my joints were cramped too tight for me to release. The guide bellowed at us. "Keep pumping, you fools, or we'll lose the engine and never get moving again." I couldn't let go anyway, so I closed my eyes and abused my body a little more. Alright, we are in the same world, so I'm going to pull the title from the top of this chapter. Control copy. Alright, chapter 22. I was supposed to watch them and repeat anything they said about... Okay, let's think this out. Alright, I was supposed to watch them and repeat anything they said about the families. Anything, good or bad, it didn't matter. Wasn't my place to decide what mattered. Just any mention, word for word, bring it back. Keep a journal for ideas is the question. I don't exactly. I have a dry erase board that's behind me. It may not be completely visible there. If I pulled it up close, it would look like the scribblings of a madman. But I have like long-term projects split out, and then I have sort of this like bottom right corner that every time a phrase or a word or something catches my attention and could be like a title for a story, I'll kind of scrawl it in there in dry erase marker, and I usually pull titles from there. And sometimes there's not a story attached to it yet. Sometimes I'll get a story idea and I'll take one of those titles to attach. And then sometimes the title kind of has an idea that hasn't percolated yet, and I'll do that. Beyond that, I don't really keep a lot of notes. I'm planning a little bit ahead on this novel because of the nature of the chapters and some things like that. But my notes were pretty detailed in the beginning and have gotten very scant at this point in the story. I write a zombie series that's up to about book 7, and that one's pretty well planned out and outlined and things like that. But in terms of ideas, it really is just titles, and sometimes the title is sort of the idea, and I'll put it down that way, and use it if I need it and that kind of thing. But as a general habit, beyond that, I don't really keep very much. I didn't even used to do that. Like, I would just try to come up with stories from whole cloth whenever I needed to write them. But that's kind of my equivalent, I guess. And so it would essentially be the same thing. It's just the title, in a way, is sort of a placeholder for the story. So that's how I go about doing that. I think it is a good idea. I know a lot of authors who don't do that. There's a friend of mine named Armand Rosamilia, who's an accomplished writer as well. And he's an accomplished writer. I'm not speaking for myself. He doesn't do that. He used to. And then he went back to look. He used to keep them on a disc, and I think it was a floppy disk. That's how long ago it was. And he went back to look, and either it didn't make sense or it wasn't that great of an idea or that kind of thing. So from his viewpoint, he decided that if the idea stuck with him long enough for him to sit down and start writing it, like a couple days or so, then he knew it was kind of a story. If it sort of evaporated before he got home and could write it down, then he figured it wasn't that great of an idea anyway. I don't have a good enough memory for that, so I typically, again, will use that dry erase board and we'll put down just either a couple words or a phrase or a title that kind of holds the place of the idea, because all that stuff doesn't stay in my head. So if I have like little reminders there, and a lot of times the stories aren't ready, I'll look over that entire board and not see a single thing that inspires me, or there'll just be one thing or the newest thing. But then I'll go back later and come back to something, and it's had time to percolate, and I kind of have a better story built around that notion at that point. So I know authors that make a good argument to not do it at all, but I guess like one quadrant of my dry erase board is the closest I have to a journal. Might be good to do something a little bigger than that, but it seems to work for me okay. All right. Just any mention, word for word, bring it back, and don't waste anyone's time thinking for myself. I knew better. I knew better if I wanted to eat. No thinking for me. Just listening and remembering. Problem was, this pair of travelers. Okay, I need to make this one sentence. What is wrong with me? Okay, problem was, this pair of travelers. No thinking from me, just listening and remembering. Problem was, this pair of travelers was saying crazy shit. Bringing back crazy shit to the family. To the family bosses. Oh, I'm glad it helps. Yeah, everybody kind of does it differently. Obviously, doing it streaming wise is a little different too in terms of process for me as well than when I sit down and do it separately. In some ways, streaming it helps because I'm not as tempted to take a break and everything, so it kind of pushes me forward. It's not ideal for everything though. Bringing back crazy shit to the family bosses was as bad or maybe worse than thinking for myself. If I repeated what these guys said, these guys who called themselves Trey and Rick, the bosses were likely to think I was crazy. Then, just being hungry would be the very least of my problems. I tracked them through the market on the far side near the bend in the river where the sewage dumps in. They stopped and looked up at the sky for a good long time, like they'd never seen a balloon before. Trey even said, "I've never seen anything like that before." I looked up in the sky like a dummy myself, waiting to get robbed, or worse. But the way they were gawking, and Trey saying a thing like that got me thinking that there must be something more up there than usual. Should have listened to the bosses about making the mistake of thinking it was just a balloon, one of the bigger ones with 3 sections to it, but still just a damn balloon. It skirted along the bottom edge of the clouds that were rather low today. It skirted along the bottom edge of the clouds that were low today. Purple, green, purple, green, and yellow. Purple, green, and yellow. What would he call it? I guess he just calls it lightning. Purple, green, and yellow lightning danced around the belly of the balloon's cabin. Purple, green, and yellow lightning danced around the belly of the balloon's cabin, and over the grounding nets along the outside of the bladders. Maybe it was the what would be a country that no longer exists? Maybe it was the Ottoman flag they weren't familiar with. Hill folks missed a lot of stuff. but these boys did not look like hill folk to me. If you'll forgive me thinking for myself. Is that electricity from the same interference that's keeping us from going to a new, it's keeping us from opening a portal into the next world. A couple things there made less sense than them acting like they'd never seen an Ottoman balloon before. Alright, so I'm going to stop there because I'm at 42,539, so that gets me to my word count goal and gives me a little time to kind of think this scene out and make a little more out of it. So let's take a look at my NaNoWriMo page. So I was at 40,023 before. Now I've met my goal for today, not the ultimate goal. So I'm changing my word count to 42,539. And I'm not sad, I'm happy. There we go. So we've updated the progress. Now I'm going to take a look at some of my friends and see how they've done. I jump back and forth because I don't want to show the friends that don't want to be seen. I can't remember if this is an update for Jessica McHugh. Again, this is her second novella for the month. So she's done close to 30,000 on the previous one and is at 8,800 on this one. So well ahead. I'm not sure if she updated today. I can't remember what her yesterday number was. Moving along, let's see what Armand Rosamilia has done. I spoke about him earlier in this. He always likes it when I mention his name and talk about how good his work is. Devil's School is 45,350. I would not be surprised if he popped through to 50,000 within the next couple days. Both of us had a goal of being done in 20 days, done at 50,000. I don't think my novel's going to be done at 50,000, so I may have to keep going for a little while, but hitting that 50,000 word goal. And I think, he's a few hundred ahead of me. We've kind of been running a few hundred ahead or behind for most of the time, but I wouldn't be surprised if he pulled ahead and finished that off. He's got a good bit of work to get done, so wrapping up this novel might be something he would like to do just so he can focus on some other things. John Quick finished yesterday, and I guess he's done. So he's at 50,182. John Quick is. I'm not sure if that novel's done yet, but that was the number he was at yesterday, so he may just be done updating, or it may be a completed novel at this point. So again, congratulations to John Quick. Got several other friends that don't want to be shown, and some that haven't updated yet, so I'm going to give them a little time to make their numbers a little more impressive. He's about the same place. Alright, let me see how he's doing. He's working on some short stories. Alex from Iowa is. Alright, let's take a look at Tim Meyer. Yeah, he's done well. Tim Meyer, Pteranodon Canyon, excuse me. He's done several monster books for Severed Press, and I believe, if I were guessing, I would say this is another one that he's doing for that particular publisher. Those books do really well with the audience for Severed Press. He's at 50,305 words. I'm not sure if the novels are done, but that's in the wheelhouse of where those novels run. They're not terribly long, and still novel length, obviously, but those books are really action packed and to the point. So you're not getting a bunch of side stories and things that sort of take away from the main plot. You're getting sort of a driving story that moves forward, and he may be one of the best at it. Armando Amelia does great monster books for Severed Press as well. But Tim was real close to the 50,000 words yesterday, so I'm not surprised that he has made that goal today. So congratulations to Tim Meyer. I got a lot of friends who are really pushing to get done early, or I guess we're just so caught up in what they were doing with their books that things went pretty well. Looking at Clickers Never Die, this is it's from the Clickers World, which used to be J.F. Gonzalez, who passed away. Brian Keene is in charge of the literary estate of J.F. Gonzalez, who's an excellent author, wonderful author. It's a shame he's no longer with us. But he's been re-releasing J.F. Gonzalez's work. He's been having authors work to complete certain projects with what J.F. Gonzalez had already written. And then the Clicker series has kind of been brought back. So if you look that up, it's great books, the ones that he wrote and the ones he co-wrote with Brian Keene. And Stephen Kazanowski and Wiley Young, I believe, are the co-writers on this one. I believe they're co-writing it. And they're the first ones to do a reboot of the Clicker series for that estate. And Clickers Never Die is theirs. So again, I'm not sure if these are just Stephen Kazanowski's numbers or if they are the combined numbers from both of them. But they're either way, 45,661 is great. And I'm not sure how long that novel's going to be, but they are very near the goal for this time. And I'm looking forward to reading it. I really enjoyed what J.F. Gonzalez did. I really enjoyed the Clickers series, and I look forward to kind of seeing those traditions continued in his name. So very proud of those authors for taking part in that project. We will look at, let me see how he's done. Cody Langell is doing well. He is his Broken Vistas novel is at 29,673, so he's well ahead, I believe. Hold on, he's either right on track or ahead of the pace for 30-day finish. So he's doing well and has been consistent all the way through. So good job with him. A lot of guys have their 14-day streak going right now. And lastly, we'll take a look at Todd Kiesling. Any author that wants me to take a look at their stuff, they can just let me know, and I'll include them in one of these updates. Spiders in the Lattice is the name of the book. I'm not sure if that's the actual cover, if that's just a mock-up. He has really great covers with the stuff he does, all the places he publishes. 36,308 is a great total for this stage and is well on track to finishing early for 50,000 words. So wonderful job to all of them. I'll bring back up my writing here and we'll take it back to the top. So I'm at 45,539, right on track to finish 50,000 words on the 20th. My guess is the novel's not done then, and so I may continue in November. I have some catching up on some things to do too, so I may set the novel aside, then read back through it and pick back up again. Maybe fix some of the holes that are already kind of bothering me with some of the earlier work. But otherwise, this story is shaping up pretty well from what I expected, which I wasn't sure exactly what to expect writing a whole novel on stream like this. But I think it turned out pretty well, considering sort of how experimental the concept was and the way that the narrative structure was going to go through. And I'm happy with where it's going right now, and also very proud of the fellow authors who are tearing it up for NaNoWriMo, and even the ones that may be struggling a little bit and may not reach their 50,000 word goal, but they've put words down and they're continuing to put words down, and that should be the most important thing that comes out of any writing effort, including NaNoWriMo. So very proud of everybody, and especially those that have really powered forward and have finished early. They're doing excellent work, and I know for a fact, as being a reader of theirs, that they do great work. So I'm looking forward to seeing their novels. Thank you, everybody, and I look forward to talking to you again tomorrow.